Good morning, my friends. It's coffee time. Woo. I had a request on a video that I posted back about 2.5 weeks ago. Somebody was asking me to do another video on more on editorial stock photography and things of that nature. So although I will probably do a more formal one and go more into depth, I figured let's do a little one today because I have my camera batteries charging and I'm going to try to go out today and see what type of editorial photo content I can get. I don't know where I'm going to go or what I'm going to do. We will see. So that's the great thing about it is there's lots of options for this type of photography. So to just give you just a general background, if you submit something in the creative category or commercial category to stock photography agencies, it can be used to promote products, to advertise things. So like I could take, I don't know, this hat and I could slap a logo or a picture on there and use it to represent whatever I'm selling, okay? That sort of thing. In general, they will not have any recognizable people or property unless there is either a model release or a property release attached to it. However, for editorial photos and photos that you take in public places or places that people generally all have access to, you can take photos and not need model releases and property releases. The one little caveat to that is if you're in an event that's like a ticketed event or that requires some sort of a special pass or otherwise to get in. I referenced taking images at the practice round at a PGA event at one point and how I couldn't use those images because it was a ticketed event. Not the vendors, the promoters and also the sports organizations have rules about what can and cannot be profited on and who can take official photos and sell them and everything else. So that's a story for another day. But in general, with editorial photos, you are capturing, a point in time, a place, a newsworthy event. Maybe you're at a public ceremony or a protest or, maybe you're just taking a picture of a busy highway with the cars going by and the stores in the background or whatever. They would have recognizable people and properties, so thus their editorial images. Now, generally, what are they going to be used for? Magazines can use them, newspapers can use them, textbooks, because they can be used for educational purposes. They could be used on people's, on websites if they're like telling, current events or news types of stories, or they're doing a story on a specific location, things like that. But again, they're not going to be used to sell a product. Okay, they're not going to be used for advertising purposes or commercial type purposes. So that's where it differs. And certain agencies are going to accept these types of images and others may not. For instance, Adobe Stock accepts editorial images, but only what are considered to be illustrative editorial. So for instance, if I took a bunch of my protein powders and I lined them up on my counter and I took photos of them, that would be like an illustrative editorial. If you had your Starbucks cup with the logo on it and you set it out on a table with beautiful flowers in the background and scenery in the background, that type of thing would be an illustrative editorial. If you took photos at like an event or like a street fair and you could see people's pictures in them, sorry, not their pictures, you could see their faces in them, then you're kind of getting out of that. That's no longer really an illustrative editorial. That's a true editorial photo. Adobe Stock does not accept them. They do not accept editorial style photos where there are recognizable people in them or faces in them. So for instance, I have a couple pictures, let's say of the Circle Line cruise line in New York City, like going up the Hudson. It's clearly an editorial photo because you can see it says Circle Line Cruises on the side of that ship, but you can see people in it. You can see people, but you can't tell who they are because it's a distance away. Even if you zoomed in, you couldn't make out facial features and tell you couldn't say, oh, look, so-and-so's on that ship. No, impossible. So that type of thing would still get accepted at places like Adobe where they don't want the recognizable faces, because you cannot tell who, if you can tell who the person is, even if you don't know them, but somewhere in the world, there's someone that can say that's so-and-so, not allowed as far as the illustrative editorial. Other sites will allow that. For years, I went down and I photographed the zombie walk in Asbury Park. It happens every year in the beginning of October. Zombies take over the boardwalk, essentially. They walk down the boardwalk, they walk down the streets in town. It's all a big public event that anyone can go to. You can clearly see it from the public streets and the public spaces. And I have plenty of photos that although people are done up in zombie makeup, they're still generally recognizable. So that is editorial, and Adobe wouldn't accept that, but Shutterstock accepts that. Deposit Photos accepts that. Getty iStock Photo would accept that, that sort of thing. So what are the rules as far as editorial photos? So if you take a commercial photo, let's say that, let's say I take a photo of this really crappy kind of rotting apple on my counter. I can edit all these little spots out and I can make this apple look perfect, and I could sell that as a commercial image. Not that I will, because I'm pretty sure there's enough apple photos by now. But my point being is that you can edit the crap out of that and still sell it as an editorial type photo. Now, if I'm going to go out and take a photo of depicting a street fair in a little local town at the beginning of spring, and there's people in it, and there's stores in it, and there's this in it and that in it, there's a couple things that I can do with that photo and any like true editorial image. You can always like make the image black and white. That's allowed. You're not changing anything about that event by doing that. You can also make minor edits. If the photo is either too bright or too dark, I can make exposure edits. So I can change the exposure. If the color balance is off, my white balance is off, and it's really not accurate and I need to change that, I can do that. Another thing, let's say that my lens had some crap on it, and when I'm looking at this photo, I can see little like spots in the sky. I can remove those little spots, okay? But you're not allowed to change anything about what that image is depicting, if that makes sense. I could not go in there and Photoshop out 3 people or Photoshop out the names on the buildings. Then if that's not editorial. Editorial photos can only be very minimally edited. They cannot change the purpose and the idea and the concept and what's actually happening in that image, if that makes sense. So minor edits, okay. Major edits are not. Commercial, you can do anything you want. You could put 5 heads on a person if they gave you a model release. You can retouch those apples and make them colors that apples don't come in. That's fine. But for editorial photos, you cannot like make a guy in the crowd have 3 heads. Unless he actually had 3 heads, you cannot do that. So do you see what I'm saying? No substantial changes other than basic color corrections. Little bit of cropping, but not enough cropping where you're going to change the idea and change what was actually photographed to begin with. If you're zooming in to begin with, and that's the actual photo before any, instead of like cropping it out in post-production, that's okay if you took it that way. But you're not going to crop the crap out of it so that it looks like so-and-so was at a location by themselves and forget about the fact that they had their family all surrounding them. So no substantial changes, that's the big thing. The whole thing that got me into this and why I'm going out and I'm going to try to do some editorial photos today is because they're, in my opinion anyway, and I think this is the opinion of a lot of people that do this, there's always going to be a need for editorial photos. Things are constantly changing. There's always new newsworthy events. You could go to one street location in a public place today, photograph it, and it could look completely different tomorrow. Okay, I could go down to the Asbury Park Boardwalk today and just take a general overall photograph of it. I could do the same thing next summer, and there's going to be differences. There might be new stores, okay? There might be less people because something's going on with the water, or who knows? there's so much that can change. So editorial that's depicting a point in time or specific events, that's always going to change. That's something that people are not going to be able to replicate in AI and things like that, because there's rules that have to be followed with editorial photography, if that makes sense. So editorial, I find those photos are much easier to upload to stock agencies, and they're reviewed rather quickly and accepted. Whereas commercial, kind of in certain agencies, seems to be stalling. There's been a lot of talk in the forums that I'm in about Adobe recently, Adobe stock, because a lot of us have commercial images that are backed up and not being reviewed. Whereas if you do editorial, it's generally reviewed like in 24 hours or so, and it's up and running on the site, or even like people that do a little AI work, that's getting accepted quicker. So it's very interesting. Is the commercial side of stock photography, is it saturated? I mean, we know it's saturated, but at what point does it become so saturated that these agencies stop accepting commercial images? Big Stock Photo has already stopped accepting new images. I've been a contributor there since 2007. My photos are still on the site. They still sell, although not very often, but I cannot upload new material there. That's one. Some of the sites have completely gone out of business. Can Stock Photo, who I had submitted to for years, and that was only commercial. You could not do editorial images there. That one shut down. Was it last year or the year before? It was in the last year or so. So there are these agencies that have existed for quite some time, and they're either now gone or they're not accepting new work. So all of this you should keep in mind if you're trying to do this to make some extra money. Know that you could take 8 million photos of apples on your counter at home. It does not mean, I don't care if it's the most beautiful photo out there, it doesn't mean it's going to get accepted. And even if it does, it doesn't mean that it's going to sell. So you kind of have to think outside the box and think, what can I still photograph that people still might have a need for? Okay, there's always going to be people online telling stories about visiting a specific location, or, the best places to go in New Jersey with your family during the summer, the best beaches, the best this, the best that. So those kinds of photos, those places are constantly changing day to day, minute to minute. There's a need for that type of thing, in my opinion. Anyway, probably people will agree with me. But anyway, if you have any questions about this, drop them down below. A good resource for this information is always on the microstock and the stock agency sites to begin with. They will tell you whether they accept editorial, what their rules are for it. Some are more strict, like Adobe, as far as not accepting actual recognizable faces and people and that sort of thing. But check it out. It will vary, and that'll give you a wealth of information too. So it's been great talking to you. Questions and comments down below, like I just said. Like and subscribe, please, because it allows me to grow this channel, and you will also receive notifications when I release new content. Have a great day. Enjoy that coffee, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.